I knew we were in serious trouble the second I saw the neighborhood security guard aiming his weapon at my son, a highly trained special operations soldier who was standing perfectly calm. Before we get into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I'm curious how far this message will reach. This all began 3 days earlier, when our community got a new HOA president named Laura Simmons. She was the type who confused authority with intimidation and loved making petty rules. She brought in her own enforcement officer, a man called Derek Shaw, who carried himself like someone who'd watched too many action movies but had zero real experience. His uniform said HOA Cobb, but his attitude screamed wannabe, who finally found a costume that made him feel important. It started with minor complaints, a notice about my mailbox not matching the approved style, a warning about my SUV being too rugged for our street, another citation about my rose bushes growing by unregulated height. Annoying, but harmless enough, I just threw the papers away. The next day, my son came home on military leave wearing casual clothes, looking completely drained, and just wanted some quiet time. He'd been deployed overseas for 8 months. All he needed was decent coffee and uninterrupted sleep. But Derek took an immediate dislike for him, not his physique, not his quiet self-assurance, and especially not the fact that my son parked his dirt bike in our driveway, something Derek claimed violated community rules. My son simply said, "Speak with my dad." But Derek wasn't accustomed to anyone refusing his demands. Power had corrupted him quickly, and he'd been consuming it recklessly. On the second day, he appeared to check our side gate without any notice or permission. He just walked right onto our property. He tried to issue my son the HOA violation ticket. My son calmly stated, "This is private land. Please step back outside." Derek didn't appreciate that response either. His face flushed crimson, his hands trembled. His voice cracked when he attempted to sound intimidating, but instead of retreating, he escalated dramatically. He followed my son to the driveway, shouting about enforcement power and compliance regulations. That's when he made the catastrophic error that transformed this from trivial HOA drama into a potentially deadly confrontation. He reached beneath his jacket and drew a handgun. Not a fake, not a replica, an actual firearm, and he pointed it deliberately at my son's head. The universe seemed to stop. My stomach clenched, my blood ran cold, and my son, he didn't even lift his arms. He just watched Derek with that profound stillness only combat veterans truly comprehend. Which returns us to that critical moment when everything spiraled out of control. "Lower your weapon," my son advised quietly. But Derek's grip only tightened, and that became the final choice he would control. Derek's pistol remained fixed on my son's face, the barrel shaking just enough to reveal he wasn't nearly as confident as he acted. My son didn't flinch, didn't accelerate his breathing, didn't display any trace of fear. Meanwhile, our security camera mounted near the front door recorded every moment of Derek's breakdown. From the instant he charged into our driveway to the moment he brandished his firearm like an amateur hero. Later, that video evidence would save us considerable legal complication. But in that moment, all I could then was, "Please don't move. Don't let this fool squeeze the trigger." Derek's voice cracked as he tried to project authority. "Get on your knees," he shouted it again. "You're resisting HOA enforcement." My son exhaled once, deliberate, composed. "You're trembling," he noted quietly. Derek jerked. "What?"
"What? You're shaking so badly," my son continued, voice barely audible. "If you fire that weapon, it won't be intentional."
"You don't want that burden on your conscience."
I said, "Get down."
My son tilted his head, analyzing him. "Have you ever aimed a gun at someone trained to disarm you?"
Derek swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "I'm warning you."
"No," my son said gently. "I'm warning you." I could almost feel the atmosphere chill. My son wasn't boasting. He wasn't making threats, he was stating reality. But Derek wasn't processing. Fear had short-circuited his thinking.
"One more order,"
Garrick said, voice breaking, "and I'll classify you as a hostile individual." Hostile, my son repeated softly. For standing motionless on my own property? Derek's posture wavered. His knees slightly gave way. His hold tightened dangerously. My son observed it the same instant I did. The moment a frightened man becomes a reckless man. I whispered, "Son, don't." But my son raised one hand slowly, palm open to reassure me. "Dad," he said without breaking eye contact, "just keep breathing normally." Then he spoke to Derek, voice like granite. "Set down the firearm." Final warning! But Derek's pride prevented him. He thrust the pistol forward several inches like a child poking with a toy. "I said drop it!" And that's when he noticed that the small green light from our doorbell camera, recording, preserving, capturing everything with perfect clarity. Derek's face went pale.
Is that thing recording?"
He asked, voice small. My son nodded. "It's been active this whole time."
Derek's bringing became frantic. "Oh no, no, I didn't mean, I'm just doing my job."
He retreated one step, panic escalating. I moved off the porch slowly. My son lifted a hand, still calm, still steady. "Dad, remain where you are." Derek's eyes darted between us. His gun wavered, his breath caught. He was coming apart. "I'm in command here," Derek snapped desperately. "I have the authority." "You're a trespasser, aiming a gun on a special operations soldier," my son said, voice low, "and you're running out of acceptable options." Then Derek made the most disastrous choice of his life. He charged forward abruptly, clumsily, panicked, hand reaching for my son's shirt like he believed he could physically overpower him. My son didn't retreat, didn't evade, he simply reacted. One swift rotation, one precise turn, one efficient strike, and suddenly the weapon wasn't in Derek's possession anymore. It was in my son's possession, and Derek was stumbling backward, eyes wide open, comprehending what had just occurred. He backed into the pavement, hands raised, voice shaking. "Dig, just don't shoot me." But the situation had already escalated because now my son controlled the weapon. And Derek finally understood whom he'd threatened. If this HOA story has your attention, hit like and subscribe, because what happens next gets even more intense. Derek's panic turned frantic. Not just scared anymore, trapped. And trapped individuals commit the most foolish actions imaginable. My son kept the weapon steady, aimed, center mass, breathing rhythmically. That calm, measured breathing only special operations personnel master. His position didn't shift an inch.
"Don't move,"
he cautioned, but Derek wasn't reasoning clearly, so it streamed down his face, his imitation badge hanging crookedly on his shirt. His eyes jumped from the gun to me and back again. Then I witnessed the instant it occurred. The terrible idea, the survival reflex of a desperate person. His mind whispered, "Take a hostage," and Derek lunged, but not toward my son. He lunged at knee hards outstretched, attempting to wrap his thumb on my neck. He thought if he used me as a human shield, he could force my son to surrender the weapon. Most catastrophic miscalculation of his existence. He barely covered half the distance. "Dad, move right," my son commanded. I shifted right as Derek's fingers grazed my collar. The gunshot echoed through the HOA, and Derek collapsed immediately, screaming, clutching his leg as blood soaked through his trousers.
He fell face down on the concrete, thrashing, yelling, trying to crawl, but making no progress. "You shot me!" he cried, voice breaking. My son didn't even blink. "You attempted to take my father hostage," he stated, lowering his weapon but keeping it ready. "That's suicidal behavior in any jurisdiction." Derek whimpered, rolling to his side. "You aimed a firearm at me," my son said. "You threatened my dad. You don't escape consequences for that." I retrieved my phone and called Sheriff Miller. He answered immediately. "What's happened?" "Fake HOA cop drew a gun on my son, then tried to take me hostage. My son discharged one round into his leg. We need officers and medical assistance. Sheriff Miller exhaled slowly. Remain in place. We'll arrive in 5. And he did. 5 minutes later, sirens pierced the quiet streets. Dust rose along the pavement as 2 patrol vehicles approached. Sheriff Miller emerged first, tall, solid, composed, hand resting on his equipment like he already understood the entire situation. He walked directly to Derek, who was still sobbing on the ground. "Well," Miller murmured, "appears somebody finally challenged the wrong special operations soldier." My son lowered his weapon and placed it on the porch railing. Miller examined the injury. "Clean, Prue," he said. "Painful, but he'll survive." Derek whimpered.
He shot me! Arrest him!
Miller raised an eyebrow. "You threatened a man's father, drew a weapon on a special ops soldier, and attempted a hostage situation. Son, you're fortunate you're not deceased." While paramedics treated Derek, Miller turned to me. "Anything occur before this incident?" That's when we explained everything. The harassment, the fake credentials, the threats, and the revelation none of us anticipated. Laura Simmons sent him. Miller exhaled. "Makes sense. She's been testing boundaries for months. Guess she finally crossed the line." 3 days later, she did more than cross it. She plummeted. Deputies entered the HOA office and arrested her immediately for instructing Derek to apply, misusing HOA money to employ him, and submitting fraudulent reports. She screamed continuously about community authority and presidential immunity. Didn't matter. Orange jumpsuits look identical on every would-be dictator. Derek went to the hospital first, then to jail. Multiple felony charges, no bail option. 1 week later, the official charges were filed. Derek Shaw faced counts of impersonating an officer, aggravated assault, attempted kidnapping, illegal weapon display, sentenced to 10 years in state prison. And regarding my son, he received a handshake from the sheriff and a quiet, good restraint. That evening, my son stood beside me on the porch, hands in his pockets, gazing at the peaceful street. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "You?" He gave a slight smile. "Yeah, he should be thankful I targeted his leg." I chuckled quietly. And that's how one fake HOA security officer discovered the hard way. Never aim a weapon at my son, and absolutely never try to use me as leverage. But the real question remains, how many other families has this association targeted with their intimidation tactics? The investigation revealed this wasn't an isolated incident. Several neighbors came forward with similar stories of harassment once news spread about what happened to us. One elderly couple had been pressured into expensive, unnecessary landscaping. A single mother was threatened with massive fines for trivial violations. This pattern of abuse went much deeper than we initially realized. The district attorney expanded the investigation, uncovering systematic harassment targeting residents who questioned the association's authority. And the most shocking part? Laura Simmons had connections with local officials who turned a blind eye to her operations. But that's a story for another video. If you want to see how we exposed the entire corrupt network and cleaned up our community, make sure you're following this channel. If this story of standing up to corrupt authority resonated with you, please support our channel by liking this video and subscribing to Winds of Thought for more real stories that need to be heard.